within us by the application of steady will, the life force in the form of God's power in the sensations, in the muscles, in the nerves, in the internal organs, heart, lungs, and so forth, is turned back. It is reversed. Only the power of steady will can reverse that tremendous flow of God's creative power out. He has made universe upon universe. How are you going to turn it back except you apply steady will that does not give up? And so, by following the techniques of self-realization, we can turn that creative force back from sensation, from the muscles, from the nerves, from the internal organs. We can turn it back first to the sympathetic nervous system, or those subtle nerves, the ear and pingular nerves. We can turn it back there first. And then, by the power of steady will, steady push, it is poured in through the Christ center at this point into the deep spine within us where our soul resides. And there, it awakens the Kundalini power, arouses it finally, and when that is aroused, passes up through our spine, enlivening the centers, finally joining with the presence of God in the cranium, in the brain, then we become one with His will. But remember, only the force of steady will can turn that, reverse that creative force of God in us, which has made this body, sustains it. But when we turn that back, it is that which arouses the presence of God sleeping within us. And that's why those who have aroused that Kundalini power have not a limited human will, they have God's will within. The metaphysics is not very difficult. The thing is to follow the techniques given by one who had changed his will from human will to divine will as the master. He has given it. He has made it easy for those who will to once more awaken the divine will within each and every one of us. We have to follow one who has done a thing, do we not? Following a real teacher, a true Son of God, one who had united his will with God's will, then we likewise can feel the power of God in us and exercise that power. One of the greatest illustrations of steady will is that passage in Daniel, the 10th chapter of Daniel. Everybody should remember this passage, wherein we read as follows. That's the most wonderful, this is the most wonderful example of steady will. Most of us apply a will, get enthused, and then fall down. We must keep going if we want God. Steady will. If you're going to be a success in business, you must have a steady will. In any profession, you've got to keep everlastingly at it. How are we going to know God unless we exercise that steady will? But we can, because we're made in His image. So, in the 10th chapter of Daniel, 12th verse, this is what we read. Now, remember this illustration of steady will. Daniel, fear not. From the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand. If you go on to understand God and set your heart on it, that arouses the steady will within you. Then it says, the moment thou didst set thy heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God. That's the application of steady will. Not just follow spiritual discipline today and tomorrow and a month, but never give it up. So it says, when thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy word. That means that Daniel set his heart to understand. He wouldn't be sidetracked. He kept his will steady. What is the result? God came to him. God's will came to him. That's why it says, and I am come for that reason. So if you want to apply the steady will, remember that verse of Daniel. Set your heart to understand. Set your heart on God, and let nothing deter you until His grace comes. Then your human will be changed into divine will. And so, going on just a little more, How to awaken your willpower. How are we going to awaken your willpower? Unite your will at the Christ center with God's will. This is the place. At the Christ center, this is the will center. Your microphone may be broken, but you can repair it. Unite your will with God's will at the Christ center. This is where God's will comes in through the medulla center to make us. And we can contact it at the Christ center. That's why we gather together the life force in the body and pour it into the Christ center, because we contact God. Now, a greater part of it that we do not utilize is stored in the 1,000-rayed lotus where God dwells. And so we must develop our will by more and more merging in God's presence at the Christ center. More and more merge in it. Develop God's will by being one with Him at the Christ center. Now we bore into the uranium atom. What do we get? We get a tremendous amount of energy. But by boring into the spiritual eye at this point, by boring into the Christ center, you get what? The energy of the universe. Because God is there. And so, to reawaken our will, we must develop our will by merging in God's presence within us. God contact is what we must have to develop our will. We must have contact with God. If we have that, as His will has created all things and is all-powerful, so our limited little human will becomes dynamic. We become one with God's will. Now comes the point. Remember, how are you going to know